We're all constantly inundated with information about productivity and rest, the debate between hard work and self-care. And these two things aren't actually as different as they seem, and it all comes back to self-love and inner child work. Let's get into it. So I really want to chat about the connection between this debate that has been going on for quite some time now around productivity culture and the psychology of inner child work, which is also related to shadow work and psychology and self-love and self-care and all of these things. And I know that they may seem disparate, but I think they're really deeply connected because of one key aspect that we're going to get into. But before we get there, let's start with the thing that is almost always talked about on social media and in self-helpy spaces, productivity culture. Within the productivity culture debate, there tends to be two sides, two camps, based on your value system, what you value. The first one is the hustle mindset. Rise and grind, right? We've all seen it, the morning routines, the 4 a.m. wake up time, the never-ending gym routines, but also the money that you're bringing in, the number of clients that you have, the number of followers you have, apparently also using Saratoga water and banana peels in your skincare routine are now a part of this. But the key to this position is that actually productivity is a moral good. That's what this debate is actually asserting, that the more that you produce, the better you are, the more worth you have, because the more you are contributing to society. And because of that, you're getting more back, usually in the form of money and power, following and financial gain. This movement also usually argues that you need to earn your rest. Rest is not something that you're just given because you're a human being in the world. It's something that you need to work hard in order to have, right? You don't just get to slack off and rest in the middle of the day. What did you do with your day? And if you didn't work hard all day, why should you get to chill? If you haven't reached your dreams, why do you get to go out to drinks with your friends on the weekend? If you haven't hustled hard enough, why do you get to go on vacation? Those are all seen as goals to achieve, not pieces of a balanced, healthy life that most human beings probably want. The other end of this spectrum is the rest as resistance movement. And you can probably already tell from the way I'm talking about this, I tend to fall a little bit more into this camp. But even this camp has some nuances with how different people relate to hard work and productivity. There are people that will argue that rest itself is productive. Rest is something that actually is allowing you to be a more productive member of society, because when you are well rested, you're better able to rise and grind. When you are taking breaks and having this healthy work-life balance, you are then actually better able to live your purpose, live your dreams, or even just produce, make money, earn, contribute, right? Whatever that end goal may be for an individual. But this still values productivity as an inherent good, that producing something, contributing something to society or to yourself, to your life, is already something that you should want to do, which isn't necessarily true for everyone. And that's where we get the even more radical piece of this rest is resistance movement that says productivity itself isn't even an inherent good. Why is contributing something, making something, producing something, earning money necessarily the thing that we should all be focused on? But here's the piece that I really want to talk about here. Both of these camps, rest is resistant and hustle grind set culture, both go back to shame. They do. Both rely on our relationship to shame to sell you whatever ideology it is that they're talking about. Even in this rest world, there's still a lot of guilt. And I mean, we've all heard in self-care and self-love movements, people talk about how, well, it's not real rest if you feel guilty for resting. But how do we psychologically undo that guilt that we might feel for taking a break? Because productivity culture is the water that we swim in, the air that we breathe, especially in the West, there is so much keeping us from letting rest just be restful and not be filled with all of this shame. We still feel like we need to earn the breaks that, even though we know we're logically worthy of taking, we're still not really taking them because of that guilt and shame. And then, of course, in the hustle, grind, set world, there is always the messaging of you're not doing enough. If you just grind hard enough, if you just push hard enough, if you just work out hard enough, if you just put in enough hours, if you just lift the most weights, if you just sleep the least amount of time, do the least amount of breaks, then one day you can rest. You've finally earned your rest. You've finally earned enjoying your life. And maybe grinding is part of how you enjoy your life. And great. But resting is something that the human body and mind needs. There is nothing we should have to do to earn basic rest, and there's often a lot of guilt in this culture when you want to take rest. And even once you've hit the goal of, I finally hit 6 figures, I'm finally able to rest, it's rarely ever actually good enough. And we see that all the time with these types of people, right? There is something that is like, if I just push hard enough, if I just work enough, if I just get to this next moment, I will finally be able to say I'm successful, be happy, check the box of achievement. You can never actually do enough to earn the rest in this mindset. And so you see how both of these become shame-coded. When we are working hard, there is this weird, shouldn't I be resting? I don't want to work too hard. Like, I'm not just a cog in the machine. I want to be doing my own thing. I have all these dreams. And there's this weird guilt for what you're working hard towards that gets talked about, but then also weird guilt that you feel for taking rest. But then also this weird shame that, well, you actually can never work hard enough because of this productivity grind set culture over here. And all of it is shame. All of it is shame. And enough. Enough of that. Enough of the shame and guilt. You don't need it. We don't need it. Shame and guilt doesn't produce anything if productivity is what you're aiming for. Shame and guilt also doesn't allow you to rest, which may also be what you're aiming for. So firstly, we need to start with interrogating our own personal values, right? Obviously, I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning. I do think that inherently valuing someone's productivity over their inherent worth is harmful to this work to begin with. But if you value productivity, or you value hard work, or you value rest, or some combination thereof, great. Just check in with your internal compass and make sure that that value system is one that really does align with you and is not just one that you've been told you should value. If you do value productivity, why? Why is producing something what you want to do and what makes you feel worthy? And I think the one thing that I will say I think we all should value and should believe is our inherent worth. You are inherently worthy of rest, rejuvenation, recharge, but also of whatever hard work is work worth doing to you. But you get to make that call. So we have to start with that value system first. But here in this video, I'm really trying to highlight how both sides of productivity culture devolve into shame, not the merits of these different answers, even though I have personal opinions and values around them. And I think that that's a necessary brick in this puzzle a necessary piece in this puzzle, brick in the wall. So, what are your values when it comes to work and rest? And then move forward accordingly without shame. That's the piece I want to focus on today. And why does shame come up so much? Why does that seem like such a natural human trait? And both sides devolving into shame is indicative of a larger cultural societal issue here. That's the problem, that even though there's two sides of almost any coin, why are both causing shame? And shame is just a complete non-starter when it comes to self-growth and building a life of coherence. And shame and guilt almost always comes back to inner dialogue. With this inner dialogue, when do you find yourself talking negatively to yourself? When you're being overproductive and you haven't eaten all day, and then that shame starts kicking in and you're telling yourself you're really not doing a good job taking care of yourself. I thought we were going to work on having 3 square meals a day. I thought we were going to work on all of these things. Or does it come when you've been resting too much? I haven't gotten anything done today. I haven't gotten off the couch. I haven't done XYZ. I've scrolled on my phone all this time. Whatever it is, when do those shame spirals start to kick up for you? And then, paying attention to what this inner dialogue is, it almost always goes back to early childhood. And that's where we get to the inner child work. Early psychology teaches us that when you're a baby, an infant, you don't view yourself as separate from your parents. Even though you are a separate entity, your brain processes you as a part of your parents. And that means the way that your parents are talking to you, your little baby brain is interpreting as the way you are talking to you. So this process starts literally right out the gate. We don't even see a separation in identity between parent and child until around age 2. This is a process called individuation and is largely associated with rebellion and individuality, and that's where we get the terrible twos and a lot of that kind of rebellious behavior that tends to happen around toddler age. It's actually very healthy for little humans to be developing their own autonomy and individuality separate and against what their parents are telling them to do, proving to themselves that they have autonomy and choice separate from this entity that they thought they were. But this shows us that your parent's voice begins as your inner voice. Tone, expectations, patterns, they all become internalized. This becomes the blueprint for how we talk to ourselves. And even once we see ourselves as individuals and grow up, developing our own sense of self-love and self-respect and individuality and autonomy, we still learn how to treat ourselves through how our parents reward, punish, praise, deal out consequences, right? All of these things go into the way that we conceive of success, failure, achievement, hard work, worthiness, all of these pieces of productivity culture that we're talking about. The reason why I want to really emphasize that this is related to this inner dialogue and inner child work is because we can't separate our personal relationship to success, failure, achievement, productivity from how we were raised, from this inner dialogue, from this blueprint that we've all been given, whether we view that as nurture, nature, or any combination thereof, right? So we're starting with the acknowledgement of the reality that is productivity culture and its relationship to shame. And we know that we need to start by truly understanding our own values when it comes to productivity and rest. And then we started understanding really where this inner child work comes into play with our relationship to shame, success, failure, achievement, etc. But what do we do now that we've acknowledged all of these different pieces? There's a technique called reparenting that is not talked about too much, but I have a specific take on that I want to share with you here I think it's helpful. Now, when I say reparenting, I am not saying that we are trying to rewrite the past or blame our parents or shame them. Absolutely not. Reparenting is actually about looking at the ways that when we become adults, we take on the parenting role for ourselves. When we're kids, our caregivers do all sorts of things for us. They tuck us into bed, wake us up in the morning, drive us to school, make us our meals, all of these very basic caring things that when we become adults, we do for ourselves. We take care of ourselves. And in this way, we step into that parent role. This actually poses another layer to the individuation journey. Just like when we were 2 and learned that we were separate from our parents, we now have this additional layer of autonomy that we get to explore. But it's actually an opportunity to look at the way that we treat ourselves, and if there is any shame narrative or negative inner talk or dialogue that we want to start to tackle, these small pieces of care that pop up in our everyday lives. Literally the way we wake ourselves up and put ourselves to bed and cook ourselves meals. It's what we all have to do for ourselves every day. And it's fundamental to the way that we show ourselves care and love. And if there are things in that blueprint that we were gifted from our parents that we want to address, these are really crucial pieces of being able to make those changes in a healthy, loving way. This is the second individuation that no one talks about, becoming your own caregiver. And this is why the term is called reparenting, because in a way you can try and redo some of the ways that your parents did these things, but also we're not trying to ignore the wins or the losses from your childhood. We're not trying to downplay any of the things that made you the beautiful, complex, nuanced human that you are, or the things that made your parents who they are too. Right? Parents are just as equally imperfect human beings doing their best. In the same way we're going to fall short when we take care of ourselves, parents fall short when they take care of kids, but they also love us so dearly. And that's the hard thing with parenting, right? Is oftentimes you do things out of love and they can still have unintended consequences. And that's true of us too. When I choose to order a side salad instead of French fries to go with my sandwich at lunch, I'm trying to do that out of love for myself, for my body. But when I do so, am I stepping into this negative narrative of, you really should be ordering the salad. You really should be being better about your food because, you're really not liking the way your body looks. And we can see how quickly even these actions of love can take on the flavor of shame. So that's why we really want to pay attention to the nuance, intention, and language that we use around all of these actions. So here's a question to consider. When you do these simple caregiving tasks for yourself, how do you do them? When you wake yourself up in the morning, do you wake yourself up with a metaphorical kiss on the forehead and a gentle good morning, or a blaring alarm clock and I'm late already? When you put yourself to bed, do you do so with, again, a metaphorical lullaby and maybe a cup of tea or something that feels warm and comforting? Or do you doom scroll until you inevitably fall asleep? When you pack yourself a lunch for your day, will you tuck a little note in there that's maybe a quote for a midday pick-me-up and a nutritious meal that you're going to, yes, look forward to, but that's also going to fuel you throughout your day? Or are you frustrated with having to make the meal for yourself and so you just decide to do fast food instead? Even little things like laundry, dishes, making your bed in the morning, cleaning your room, keeping your space organized, as simple and little as these acts are, the way we do them becomes our life. It becomes our narrative. And this is why it's inner child work. Would you wake yourself up, put yourself to bed, make yourself lunch, the way that you would want 8-year-old you to be woken up, put to bed? made lunch for, cared for, loved. And that's the piece of this that has become so powerful for me. Thinking about waking myself up in the morning, not as, I need to get my sorry 25-year-old ass out of bed, but 8-year-old Reese has a dream life to wake up to. Makes my mornings a lot sweeter. When I pack myself a lunch because I'm going to be out all day, thinking of it as a way that I get to care for that little girl inside of me makes it feel less like a burden and more like an opportunity. And when I think of what that little girl deserves, it becomes a lot easier to talk to her with kindness and gentleness as opposed to shame. Even when I get ready in the morning, am I looking at the mirror and immediately trying to fix all of the flaws that I see? Or do I see the beautiful smile of the little girl that is inside of me and I want to enhance the natural beauty that is already there? One trick that you've probably heard some other people talk about that I like to use is putting pictures of little me around. I keep one in my bathroom and there's one at the foot of my bed just because when I see them, it reminds me who I'm doing this for. And even when days are hard, it becomes a lot easier when you remember that you are already living your dream life. The life that you are living is the life that little you dreamed of. When I see those pictures, I'm not just forcing myself to get through a day, forcing myself out of bed, shaming myself to eat healthy instead of junk food, shaming myself into going to the gym, forcing myself to go to bed early and leave from some event that I wanted to stay at. I'm taking care of myself. I am loving myself the way that I deserve to be loved and cared for. And all of these pieces are interconnected. If we want to truly rest, actually get good rest, or ever be actually productive and actually produce something worth producing, we need to be careful with how shame is leaching into all of these things. It starts with how we talk to ourselves, how we show up for ourselves. Both sides of the productivity culture debate become toxic when they devolve into shame. And I even think that both of these options are kind of a false paradigm that we've been forced to accept, that we can only value productivity and being a contributing member of society or rest and relaxation. And that's just not true. This goes back to the debate that I was talking about earlier in this video. Hustle culture very clearly prioritizes capitalism and producing for the sake of producing. But also, in the past 8 years that I have been researching the human experience and purpose, the people who are living in alignment with their purpose and with fulfillment, the only thing that all of those people have in common is the drive to serve others. And that drive to serve others, to fulfill your purpose, takes work. It takes hard work. You have to get up and you have to do stuff. And when we start to parent ourselves, really parent ourselves with love, with care, with compassion, with gentleness, that is when meaningful work and meaningful rest can come into play. It doesn't matter what side of this debate you end up on if both of them devolve into shame. I would much rather you have meaningful relationships to one of them than shameful relationships to both. But I think it's possible that we can all have a meaningful relationship to both productivity and rest. And also, you need to rest in order to work hard. And you need to work hard in order to rest. Think about the days when you get a really good workout in and you've been walking around all day doing stuff. You usually sleep pretty well that night. And then think about your days after you have a really great night's sleep. You tend to get a little bit more done. These are reciprocal and flow back and forth between each other. Rest and productivity have been pitted against each other as enemies, but they desperately need one another. They're partners and important aspects in how we live in alignment with our purpose and live coherently. So If this resonated, if it made you think about something differently, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know your relationship to inner child work, your thoughts on productivity, the productivity debate, and the way that these things are interconnected. I always want the comments to be a place for us to have real conversation about these things, and let's do so with kindness and nuance and support for one another. Because the same way productivity and rest are partners, we're partners in living coherently, in living with purpose. Thank you for being here. You are the most important part of all of this work. And as always, I hope you feel like you are living more coherently. Until next time, love.